Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavati Tamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us, may he guide us and give us strength and right understanding. May love and harmony be with us all. Peace, peace, peace. And good evening, and a very happy and blessed Sri Ramakrishna's birthday to you all. May his blessings be with you. So today we're going to continue with Swami Abhedananda, but we're going to read his collection of the parables that Sri Ramakrishna used to tell, the ones that he remembered him telling. So that's in honor of the special day today. So there are quite a few of them. We probably won't get to all of them, but we'll get to some of them. And we will also hear one of the musical settings of one of the parables. All right, so if you'd like to start, Atma, we'll read the first. The first one's actually a little prayer.
Mother, I am the machine. You are the operator. I am the room, and you are the tenant. I'm the sheath, but you are the sword. I'm the chariot. You are the charioteer. I do just as you makest me do. I speak as you make me speak. I behave as you make me behave. Not I, but thou. All right. First parable. A place was enclosed by means of a high wall. The men outside did not know what sort of place it was. And once 4 persons determined to find out what was inside by scaling the wall with a ladder. As soon as the first man ascended to the top of the wall, he laughed out loud and jumped in. The second also, as soon as he ascended, similarly laughed aloud and jumped in, and so did the third. But when the fourth and last man got up to the top of the wall, he found stretched beneath him a large and beautiful garden containing pleasant groves and delicious fruits. Though strongly tempted to jump down and enjoy the scene, he resisted the temptation, and coming down the ladder conveyed the glad tidings about the beautiful garden to all outsiders. Brahman is like the walled garden. He who sees it forgets his own existence, and with ecstatic joy rushes headlong unto it, to attain to moksha or absolute freedom. Such are the holy men and liberated saints of the world. But the saviors of humanity are those who see God, and being at the same time anxious to share their happiness of divine vision with others, refuse the final liberation and willingly undergo the troubles of rebirth in the world in order to teach and lead struggling humanity to its ultimate goal.
Actually, that parable actually inspired a part in the first operetta that I wrote. It was an interfaith operetta, and it had to do with a young Greek man and a Roman woman who were supposed to get married, and they were preparing their wedding vows and discovered they were worshiping different gods, and this was a terrible problem, and they were going to have to solve it. And so they both prayed, and the gods told them that they would have to get the answer by going to Mount Olympus. So they had to go to Mount Olympus, and there they saw all the gods together. All of them were roaming around together and perfectly happy. And they told them that for the answer to their question, they were going to have to go to the Valley of the Mist. And this is where the wall parable came in. It actually is very different from the actual setting of this parable, but this is where I got the idea. They had to go to the Valley of the Mist, and at the Valley of the Mist, it was like this walled garden most people, once they get in, couldn't get out. It was a one-way street, and you jumped in and you didn't come back. So in order to get their answer, one brave person had to volunteer to go in, and he sung the answer back to them, that all the gods were really just the same God in different forms. And so they were able to go ahead with their wedding. So that was a little interfaith operetta. But I got the idea of going into this valley of the mist from this particular parable of the people looking over the wall. All right, let's read about the woodcutter now.
The woodcutter led a very miserable life with the small means he could procure by daily selling the load of wood brought from a neighboring forest. Once a sannyasin who was wending his way through the forest saw him at work and advised him to proceed onward into the interior recesses of the forest, intimating him that he would be a gainer thereby. The woodcutter obeyed the injunction and proceeded onward until he came to a sandalwood tree. And being much pleased, he took away with him as many sandal logs as he could carry, and sold them in the market and derived much profit. Then he began to think within himself why the good sannyasin did not tell him anything about the wood of the sandal trees, but simply advised him to proceed onward into the interior of the forest. So the next day he went on beyond the place of the sandalwood, and at last came upon a copper mine, and he took with him as much copper as he could carry, and selling it in the market, got much money from it. Next day, without stopping at the copper mine, he proceeded further still, as the sadhu had advised him to do, and came upon a silver mine, and took with him as much of it as he could carry, and sold it all and got even more money. And so daily proceeding further and further, he got to gold mines and diamond mines, and at last became exceedingly rich. Such is also the case with man who aspires after true knowledge. If he does not stop in his progress after attaining a few extraordinary and supernatural powers, he at last becomes really rich in the eternal knowledge of truth.
Yes, and Swami Brahmananda used to say that spiritual life begins with samadhi. That's a bit of a sobering statement, but it is a good remembrance that we shouldn't stop with just a little progress or think we've had some great achievement. We want to, whatever achievements we get should motivate us to go on further, because the results are even better the further you go, and not to stop with just a little progress. And I think Swami Swahananda, who was the head of this center for a good 30 years, probably was very inspired by this story, because he entitled his books, which were the letters of Paramashananda, Go Forward. So this must have meant quite a bit to him. And it also just tells us just an ordinary life, that we always need to be pressing forward and not just sort of getting stuck in a rut, you could say. All right, let's read about the well.
A man began to sink a well, but when he had dug down a few feet, another man came to him and said, "Brother, why are you laboring here in vain? You will not find a water spring underneath. Nothing but dry sand will come out." Believing in his words, he left that place, and selecting another spot, he began to dig. There he met a stranger who assured him, saying, "Oh, brother, formerly there was a well here. Why are you wasting your energy? Now, if you go a little further south and dig, you will find a very good water spring." Immediately, he followed his advice. There again, another man prevented him from digging. Thus being interrupted again and again at every spot which he had selected, he at last failed to sink the well. Similarly, in the spiritual path, many people have lost everything by following the directions of irresponsible instructors. Now they follow one master, but having neither firmness of faith nor strength to resist the temptations, trials and tribulations which come in their way, they abandon him and obey another, and then a third, and so eventually they either become rank atheists or arrive at the conclusion that in this life it is impossible to attain spirituality. He who ever wishes to be spiritual must have firm faith in one master and follow his directions with implicit obedience and infinite patience.
This reminds me of something that's not particularly related to the spiritual life, but that movie, Mr. Blanding Builds His Dream House. Do you remember that? The original version with Cary Grant. And Mr. DeSanders was trying to dig their well, and they dug, and they had to dig like 200 feet down before they got the well. And then they started putting in the floor in the flower room, and as soon as they dug out a little bit of dirt to put in the stone foundation, they sprang a well. And Cary Grant says, why did you have to dig down 200 feet over there, and we've got water right here in the flower room? Well, it's because down over there, I reckon the water's about 200 feet down. And over here, I reckon it's only about a foot down. Yeah. Now, some people wonder about, interfaith ideas, but you can always think that of using different tools to dig the same well. As long as you're focused and you have a spiritual guide that's instructing you, it doesn't mean you can't do different things or hear different ways. But you always have to remember that you're digging your well and not get distracted. So that's the main issue here, is don't get distracted. Now he's going to follow this idea of firm faith in one master here, and faith in several ways here. Faith is going to be a big topic in the next couple of parables. And that was a big teaching of Sri Ramakrishna, was to have faith. And Swami Vivekananda as well. And of course, he told people that you have to have faith in yourself as well as in the faith in the Guru, and that ultimately the Guru is inside of you. But we have external gurus to guide us and to awaken that internal Guru. So let's read the next parable.
A man wanted to cross the river. The sage gave him an amulet and said, "This will carry you across." The man, taking it in his hand, he began to walk over the water. When he reached the middle of the river, curiosity entered into his heart, and he opened the amulet to see what was in it. Therein he found written on a piece of paper the sacred name of Rama. The man said, "Is this the only secret?" No sooner had he said this than he sank. It is faith in the name of the Lord that works miracles, for faith is life, and doubt is death.
All right, we got a couple more here on faith that we can read. They're not very long.
Bhagavan Sri Ramachandra had to bridge the ocean before he could cross over to Ceylon. But Hanuman, his faithful monkey servant, with one jump crossed the ocean through the firmness of his faith in Rama. Here the servant achieved more than the master, simply through faith. A disciple, having firm faith in the infinite power of his guru, walked over a river even by pronouncing his name. The guru, seeing this, thought within himself, "Well, is there such a power even in my name? Then I must be very great and powerful." No doubt. The next day, he also tried to walk over the river, pronouncing, I. But no sooner had he stepped into the water than he sank. and was drowned. Faith can achieve miracles, while vanity or egoism is the death of man.
Now, this next one, when I was doing the Ramakrishna Oratorio, I was looking for parables to illustrate faith, and I almost used this one, but then I decided on another one because I wanted to use more, give more opportunities to soloists. So I picked a different one, but this is a nice one as well. But I used some of the sentiments in this and some of the statements in the final course about faith. So why don't we read this one?
A milkmaid used to supply milk to a Brahmin priest living on the other side of the river. Owing to the irregularities of boat service, she could not supply it punctually every day. Once being rebuked for her lateness, the poor woman said, "What can I do? I start early from my house, but have to wait a long time at the river bank for the boatmen and the passengers." The priest said, "Woman, they cross the ocean of life by uttering the name of God. Canst thou not cross this little river?" The simple-hearted woman became very glad at heart on finding this easy means of crossing the river. And the next day, the milk was supplied early in the morning. The milkmaid was also happy as she saved her fare. One day, the priest said to the woman, "How is it that you're no longer late now?" And she said, "Why, I crossed the river by uttering the name of the Lord, as you told me to do. I don't need to wait for a boatman." The priest could not believe this and said, "Can you show me how you do this?" The woman took him with her and began to walk over the water. Looking behind, the woman saw that he was rather upset and said, "Well, how is this, sir? You're uttering the name of the deity with your mouth, but at the same time, with your hands, you're trying to keep your clothes untouched by water. You're not fully relying on the deity." Entire resignation and absolute faith in God are at the root of all miraculous deeds.
Yes, that was the line I used. I used the parable of the pot of curd, where the lady is chastised by the guru for bringing just the milk when he expected her to actually make the rice pudding, and tells her to go drown herself in the river. So she goes and prays, and the goddess gives her the miraculous pot of curd, and she brings it back. And so because of her faith in God, she's given this miraculous pot of curd that no matter how many times you pour the curd out of it, it still has plenty of curd left to fill the rest of the vessels. And so then they ended with this chorus of resignation and absolute faith in God are at the root of all miraculous deeds. All right, let's read about the father.
A father was once passing by a field, having his 2 sons with him. One he had taken up in his arms, the other was walking along with him, holding his father's hand. They saw a kite flying, and this boy, having let go his hold on his father's hand, began to clap. "See, Papa, there's a kite." But as he had to let go the hold of his father's hand, he stumbled and got hurt. But the boy that was carried by the father, he clapped his hands with joy, but he did not fall, as he was held by his father. The former represents self-help in spiritual life, while the latter indicates self-surrender.
Sometimes the illustration is used of the comparison of a kitten and a baby monkey, where the kitten just lies there and the mother has to pick it up by the nape of its neck, whereas the monkey clings to the back of the mother. So one of them is using its self-effort to cling to the mother. The other one is just relying on the mother completely. And there's something to say for both of those attitudes, actually, to cling to the mother for help and to be completely self-surrendered. All right, let's go to the mango grove here.
2 men went into a garden. No sooner did the worldly wise man enter the gate, he began to count the number of the mango trees, how many mangoes each tree bore, and what might be the approximate price of the orchard. But his companion went to the owner, made his acquaintance, and quietly went under the mango tree and began to pluck the fruit and eat it, with the owner's consent, of course. Now, who's the wiser of the two? Eat mangoes, it will satisfy your hunger. What is the good of counting the leaves and of vain calculations? The proud man of intellect is vainly busy in finding out the why and wherefore of creation, while the humble man of wisdom acquaints himself with the Creator and enjoys the supreme bliss in this world.
All right, well, it's probably time for the musical parable. The musical parable is the parable of the chameleon. And the story is illustrated with 6 different people who wander through the forest and have seen this little creature. But depending on the time of day and what kind of background it's on, it appears different colors. And so they keep arguing with each other as to what color this creature is until they come to the man who lives under the tree, and he tells them that it's a chameleon. And so the musical symbolism here is that you'll hear each person sing their tune, and all the tunes will eventually go together. So each tune sounds like an independent tune, but at the end you'll find that all the tunes can actually be sung together in harmony.
transcend the grand partial truth and find the unity. When good obedience into cause and people disagree, perhaps each one is partially right, but it's not totally. The partial truth when thought as whole is most illusory. Transcend the petty partial truth and find the unity. Transcend the petty partial truth and find
Well, that was his interfaith message. Transcend the petty partial truths and find the unity. All right. Let's continue. Let's see, we're all down to, let's see. Yeah, to 513. All right.
Once the Bhagavan, addressing one of his favorite disciples, said, "When syrup is kept in a large basin, flies come from all sides and sit upon it. Some drink the sweet juice sitting on the brim of the vessel, while others fall into it, and enjoy rolling and plunging into it. Similarly, will you taste the divine nectar of Abhedananda, absolute existence, intelligence and bliss, leisurely from the brim, and then flee from it? Or will you enjoy the pleasure of testing it and of plunging yourself at once into it?" The disciple replied, "Oh, I like to drink from the brim and fly away and live, but not to roll in the juice and die." "This," the master said, "you fool! He who plunges himself into the ocean of nectar never dies, but becomes immortal."
Yes. No, that's the teaching here, is to realize that, and a lot of times you hear these near-death experiences and things, and there's and the Tibetan Book of the Dead and so forth describe instances where it's somewhat terrifying, and if you're not prepared for that plunge into the infinite light, you may end up turning back and getting reborn and so forth. And so that's the message here, is that the plunge into the infinite may seem like you're losing yourself, but you're only losing the little self. The immortal self is merged with the one true self. All right, let's read the next one.
Ramachandra, after being enlightened by the precepts of his guru, determined to renounce the world. Dasarata, his father, sent the sage Vashishta to instruct him. Vashishta saw that intense non-attachment had come upon Rama. He said, "Rama, first reason with me, and then leave the world. I ask you, is the world separate from God? If it be so, you are at liberty to forsake it." Pondering over these words, Rama saw that it was God who manifested himself as the jiva, the individual ego, and the world, and in his being everything existed. So Rama remained silent.
Yes, and of course, another lesson here is that even incarnations have to have teachers, and of course Ramakrishna had several teachers, then we get to kind of see their enlightenment process through these, as these teachers give them instructions. All right, let's read the next one.
When it was argued that a family man may remain in the family, but may have no concern with it, and consequently may remain uncontaminated by the world, an illustration was cited to refute such an argument, which is as follows. A poor Brahmin once came to one of the family men who was unconcerned with family affairs, to beg some money. When the beggar asked him for some money, he replied, "Oh, sir, I never touch money. Why are you wasting your time begging from me?" The Brahmin, however, would not go away. Tired with his importunate entreaties, the man at last resolved in his mind to give him a rupee and told him, "Well, sir, come tomorrow and I shall see what I can do for you." Then going in, this typical family man, being unconcerned, told his wife, who was the manager of his affairs, "Look here, dear, a poor Brahmin is in great difficulty and wants something of me. I've made up my mind to give him a rupee. What do you think about that?" "Oh, what a generous fellow you are," she replied. "Rupees are not like leaves and stones to be thrown away without any thought." "Well, deal," replied the husband in an apologizing tone. "The man's very poor. We should not give him less than a rupee." "No," replied the wife, "I cannot spare that much. There's a 2 anna bit, and you can give him that if you like." The man, of course, had no other alternative, being himself unconcerned in all such worldly matters, and he took what his wife gave him. Next day the beggar came and received only a 2 anna bit. Such uncontaminated family men are really henpecked persons who are solely guided by their wives, and as such are very poor specimens of humanity.
Okay, let's just go on.
Once a God-intoxicated sadhu came to the Kali temple of Rani Rasmani, where the Bhagavan lived. One day the saint did not get any food, and though feeling hungry, he did not ask anybody for it. But seeing a dog eating the remnant of a feast thrown away in a corner on used leaf dishes, he went there and embraced the dog, and he said, "Brother, how is it that they are eating without giving me a share?" And he began to eat with the dog. Having finished his meal in this strange company, he entered the temple of the Mother Kali, and he prayed with such an earnestness of devotion, the temple almost shook. When having finished his prayer, he was going away, and he told his nephew Hridoy, "Go and follow this man. Tell me what he says." Hridoy followed him to some distance, when the sage turning said, "Why are you following me?" Hridoy said, "Sir, give me some advice." The sage replied, "When the water of the dirty ditch and the yonder glorious Ganges will appear one in thy side, and the sound of this and the noise of that crowd will have no distraction to thy ear, then you shall reach the divine wisdom." So when Hridoy returned and told this, the Bhagavan, he said, "That man has reached the higher state of ecstasy, which is the result of divine wisdom. The sadhus roam about like children or like madmen, and in various other disguises."
Yeah, so he didn't see any difference in where the food came from. Let's see, how much time do we have here? Let's skip down to let's see which one would be a good one. Oh, let's read 520. Oh, sorry.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
A heron was slowly walking to catch a fish. Behind him there was a hunter aiming an arrow at it. But the bird was totally unmindful of this. The Abhedananda, saluting the heron, said, When I sit in meditation, let me follow that example and never turn back to see who is behind me.
Yeah, so in meditation, you have to try to put everything else out of your mind. You can't be thinking about, I wonder how that person's meditating back there. I wonder if he's falling asleep over there. I wonder why that person's nodding back and forth. Yeah, yeah. So just focus on yourself. Okay, let's read about the kite.
A kite with a fish in its beak was followed by a host of crows and other kites, which were screeching and pecking at it, were trying to snatch the fish away. In whatever direction it went, the crowd of kites and crows followed, in screeching and clawing. Getting tired of this annoyance, the kite let go of the fish, when it was instantly caught by another kite, and at once the crowd of kites and crows transferred their kind attentions to the new owner of the fish. The first kite was left unmolested, sat calmly on the branch of a tree. Seeing this quiet and tranquil state of the bird, the Abhedananda saluted him and said, "Thou art my guru, O kite, for thou hast taught me that so long as man does not throw off the burden of the world, of worldly desires that he carries, he cannot at all be undisturbed and at peace with himself."
Yeah, it reminds me, there have been several studies that of levels of happiness, and people that win the lottery have a lower happiness rating afterwards than they did before. And a lot of that is due to all their relatives and friends thinking that they can now ask for almost anything they want. "Oh, you just won the lottery. Oh, could you help me buy a new car, or with my mortgage payments, or with this or with that?" And so it's like the poor kite with the fish. Everybody's following the person trying to get something. And of course, many famous and rich people end up with that kind of problem, where they're constantly hounded to give here and there. All right, got time for one more, and then we'll
The next one.
finish. Yeah, so just read about the Tantrika.
It is said that when a tantrika tries to invoke the deity through the medium of the spirit of the dead, he sits over a fresh human corpse and keeps near him food and wine. During the invocation, if at any time the corpse is vivified, though temporarily, and opens its mouth, the intrepid invoker must pour wine and food into its gaping mouth at the time to appease the elemental that has, for the time being, taken possession of the dead body. If he does not do so, the invocation is interrupted by this elemental, and the higher spirit does not descend. So dwelling in the bosom of the carcass of the world, thou want to attain beatitude, thou must first provide yourself beforehand with everything necessary to pacify the clamor of all worldly demands. Otherwise, your devotion will be broken and interrupted by worldly cares and anxieties.
Yeah, you have to take care of your basic needs, and then after that you can sit and do your spiritual practices. And also you have to make everything that you do a spiritual practice. So whatever your occupation is, and homemakers, this also applies to homemaking. Taking care of a family situation or doing a particular job, you have to turn that into part of your spiritual practice. If it's difficult to keep that in mind throughout the day, you at least have to keep it in mind as you begin the work and when you finish the work. And that's part of what we do in Arati in the evening. In Arati in the evening, we're offering back to the deity all of the things that we've done during the day. Now, of course, many of us end up working even past Arati time, but we can do, symbolically, it's still a time of remembering that everything is offered back to the divine. And the symbolism of the Arati is that the 5 elements actually represent are represented by the 5 items that are worshipped, that are offered. So you wave the light, and then you offer water, and you offer cloth, and then a flower, and then you wave the fan. And those stand for radiation energy, light energy. The water stands for electrical energy, and the cloth stands for space, which stands for gravitational energy, which operates in space. The flower represents the magnetic energy, and the, where am I here? Yeah, all over. Yeah, the fan then represents vayu, or wind, or kinetic energy. And indeed, the universe is made up of 5 energies. E equals mc squared. So all the matter in the universe and all the energy in the universe is all energy. And those are 5 of the principal manifestations of it in an energetic form. So our arati is highly symbolic of offering everything back to the divine. All right, so again, blessings on this very special day of Sri Ramakrishna's birth, and we'll close with a chant. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Filled with Brahman are the things we see. Filled with Brahman are the things we see not. From out of Brahman floweth all that is. From Brahman all, yet is it still the same. Om, peace, peace, peace.